The morning my husband shoved our separation agreement across the table with a smug grin, convinced I would leave with nothing but my suitcase and a broken heart, until the mediator revealed a document that made his smug expression instantly vanish. The air conditioning in the downtown Austin high-rise was working overtime. It smelled faintly of ozone and expensive floor wax. Silas sat across from me in a tailored navy suit that cost more than my first car. He was leaning back in his leather chair, tapping a silver pen against the mahogany table. Next to him sat his lawyer, Thad Trask. Thad was checking his watch. He had the bored, heavy-lidded expression of a man who billed $1,000 an hour to watch weaker people fold. Caden, the court-appointed mediator, sat at the head of the table. He folded his hands. "We have the final settlement terms presented by Mr. Vanguard, $30,000 in a lump sum, forfeiture of all joint physical assets, and a standard non-disclosure agreement regarding the marriage." Silas slid the paper toward me. He didn't even look at my lawyer, Elena, he just looked at me. "Sign it, Maya. It's more than fair. You can get a nice little studio in North Campus. Good luck finding an apartment on a freelancer's budget." I didn't touch the pen. For 3 years, I had lived in the shadow of the Vanguard family name. Silas was the golden boy of the Austin tech scene. He was relentless. He was charming. He was entirely hollow. When we met, I was a back-end developer doing contract work. He told me I had a good eye but needed to focus on things that actually mattered. What he meant was, I needed to focus on him. My late-night coding sessions in our basement annoyed him. He called it a hobby. His father, Jasper, used to pat my shoulder at Thanksgiving dinners and tell the extended family how sweet it was that Silas had found a girl with such quaint little projects. I let them talk. I let them think I was just playing on my laptop. In reality, I was building a predictive AI algorithm for supply chain logistics. I saw a massive inefficiency in the way freight companies routed their trucks across Texas. I wrote the code. I tested it. I quietly partnered with a Dallas freight company for a beta test, and within 3 months, I saved them $600,000 in fuel and deadhead miles. Silas didn't know about the money. He didn't know about the contracts. He just laughed at my screen time until he needed something to sell. I found out on a Tuesday. He had left his iPad unlocked on the kitchen island. I was looking for a recipe, but his email was open. Right at the top was a 90-page pitch deck for his company's upcoming Series B funding round. He was asking for $20 million. The core of his pitch was a revolutionary new proprietary routing algorithm. I read the deck. It was my code. Line for line, feature for feature. He had scraped my private beta repository from our home network and slapped his company logo on it. When I confronted him at his corporate gala 2 nights later, he pulled me into a quiet hallway. I told him he stole my life's work. He just adjusted his cuffs and laughed. "You built it on my Wi-Fi, under my roof. It belongs to my company. Don't be dramatic." When I told him I would go to his investors, his eyes went dead. He went home, packed a bag, and filed for divorce the next morning. Now, he was sitting across from me waiting for me to take his $30,000 and disappear. I looked at Elena. Elena didn't smile. She just opened her thick leather binder. The sound of the metal rings snapping open echoed in the quiet room. "We reject the settlement offer," Elena said evenly. Thad sighed loudly. "Elena, come on. Your client contributed zero financial equity to the marriage. My client is offering a generous transitional package. If we go to trial, she gets nothing. We will bury you in forensic accounting. We have no interest in your client's company or his personal bank accounts," Elena said. She pulled out a stack of heavy, watermarked documents and slid them across the table. They stopped right in front of Thad. "However, we need to address the intellectual property infringement." Silas frowned. He stopped tapping his pen. "What is this?" Thad asked, picking up the top sheet. "Those are certified federal patent documents," Elena said. Her voice was ice. "My client filed for the patent on the routing algorithm 8 months ago. She filed under an anonymous LLC, which she fully owns. Furthermore, she currently holds exclusive, multi-year licensing contracts with your client's 3 largest competitors. Her current market valuation, based on active revenue, is $12 million. The color drained from Silas's face so fast, he looked physically ill. Thad stopped reading. He looked at the paperwork, then looked at Silas. "Silas," Thad said, his voice suddenly very tight. "Is this the algorithm in the Series B deck?" Silas couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "It gets better," Elena continued. She slid a single, stark white document across the table. "This is a formal federal cease and desist. Your entire $20 million funding round is based on technology you do not legally own. You have marketed it to investors. That is wire fraud. If you use it, or if you attempt to close that funding round, we will sue your company into oblivion and refer the matter to the SEC." The room went dead silent. Only the ack hummed. Thad dropped the papers on the table. He glared at Silas. "You told me you developed this in-house. You signed an affidavit stating it was clean. It was on my Wi-Fi." Silas stammered, his voice cracking. He looked at Thad wildly. "She built it in my house. It belongs to me." "That's not how intellectual property law works, Silas," Elena said quietly. Silas turned his panic toward me. He leaned over the table. The smugness was completely gone, replaced by a raw, naked terror. "Maya, please. The investors are flying in on Thursday for the final signatures. If I don't have the algorithm, they'll pull out. The bridge loan comes due next month. I'll go bankrupt. You planned this to ruin me." "No," I said. I kept my voice perfectly level. "I just stopped allowing you to steal my brilliance." I stood up. Elena gathered her binder. We walked out of the conference room, leaving Silas staring blankly at the wall while Thad began shouting at him. When the elevator doors closed, Elena let out a long breath. "Well, that felt good." "It did," I said. "Don't get comfortable," she warned as we descended to the lobby. "You just backed a cornered animal into a trap, and his family has teeth. They aren't going to just let you walk away with $12 million and their son's reputation in ruins." I stepped out into the blinding Texas heat. I felt lighter than I had in years. I thought the worst was over. I was completely wrong. 2 days later, I was standing at the checkout checkout counter of a small grocery store in my new neighborhood. I swiped my debit card for a basket of basic groceries. The terminal beeped, declined. I frowned. I had transferred $50,000 from my LLC's business account to my personal checking just that morning to cover my legal retainer and first month's rent. I swiped again. Declined. Please contact your institution. A hot flush of embarrassment crept up my neck. I apologized to the cashier, left the groceries, and walked out to my car. I called the bank from the driver's seat. I'm sorry, Miss Vanguard, the customer service rep said after putting me on hold for 10 minutes. There is an active freeze on all accounts associated with your social security number. A freeze? From who? I didn't authorize this. It's a court-ordered injunction, ma'am, originating from the Travis County Civil Court. That's all the information I have. I hung up and called Elena. She answered on the first ring, sounding breathless. I was just about to call you, she said. Where are you? In my car. My bank accounts are frozen. I know, Elena said. Silas didn't file it. His father did. Jasper Vanguard. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Jasper was a man who bought politicians like they were cheap suits. How? On what grounds? Jasper's holding company technically owns the deed to the house you and Silas lived in, Elena explained, speaking quickly. He just filed a massive civil suit claiming that you ran a commercial enterprise out of a residential property without paying commercial rent, and more importantly, they are claiming you used hardware purchased by Vanguard Holdings to write the code. They got a judge to grant an emergency asset freeze pending discovery. That's insane, I said, gripping the steering wheel. I used my own laptop. Did you ever check your email on Silas's computer? Did you ever use the house server to back up a file? I thought back over 3 years of marriage, 3 years of shared networks, shared devices, living in a house owned by my father-in-law, maybe once or twice. I don't know. Does it matter? To Jasper? No, he doesn't need to win the case, Maya. He just needs to tie up your assets so you can't afford to fight him. He's trying to starve you out. Can we fight the injunction? Yes, Elena said, but it will take weeks. How much cash do you have on hand? I opened my wallet. $40. Okay, don't panic. We will file an expedited motion to lift the freeze on the LLC accounts. In the meantime, do not speak to Silas. Do not speak to Jasper. And whatever you do, keep your clients happy. If you lose your revenue stream right now, we're dead in the water. I spent the weekend eating cheap ramen in my sparse apartment, trying to keep my panic at bay. I spent 18 hours a day monitoring the servers for my clients, ensuring the algorithm was running flawlessly. It was the only leverage I had left. On Monday morning, I walked to a local coffee shop to use their Wi-Fi because I couldn't afford to activate the internet at my new apartment yet. I was waiting for my drip coffee when I heard my name. Maya? I turned. It was Nadia. We had been close friends for the last 2 years. We used to drink wine on her patio and complain about our husbands. She was standing by the pastry case, holding a latte. Nadia, I said, feeling a sudden rush of relief. Hi, it's so good to see you. I stepped forward to hug her, but she took a distinct step back. Her eyes were cold, sweeping over my plain t-shirt and jeans. I'm surprised you're out in public, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the hum of the calf. I dropped my arms. Excuse me? Silas told us, Nadia said. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and deep disgust. He told everyone, Maya. We all know you're trying to extort him. After everything he did for you. After he gave you a home and a life. I stared at her. Nadia, that's a lie. He stole from me. He told us you were having a mental breakdown, she continued, speaking over me as if I hadn't said a word. He said you got obsessed with his work and started copying his files, claiming they were yours. Jasper is devastated. Silas is trying to protect you from criminal charges, but you're just pushing it. You believe him? I asked. The betrayal stung more than the frozen bank accounts. I believe the man who built a successful company from nothing, Nadia said coldly. Not the woman who sat in his basement for 3 years playing on her computer. Stay away from us, Maya. She turned and walked out. I stood there, my face burning as a few people in the line stared at me. Silas wasn't just fighting me in court. He was salting the earth. He was rewriting history, erasing me completely from my own life, using his social weight to turn me into a crazy, bitter ex-wife. I grabbed my coffee and practically ran back to my apartment. When I opened my laptop, my email chime dinged. It was a message from Arlo Farrow, the operations director at the Dallas Freight Company. They were my biggest client, the anchor of my $12 million valuation. The subject line read, urgent contract review. I clicked it. Maya, we need to talk immediately. We just received a formal legal notice from Vanguard Holdings. They are claiming disputed ownership of your routing algorithm. Our legal department is advising us to suspend our use of your API until title ownership is definitively proven in court. We cannot run our trucks on contested code. Please call me. My hands started shaking. I dialed Arlo's number. Arlo, it's a scare tactic, I said the second he picked up. I own the patent. It's registered to my LLC. Maya, I like you, Arlo said. He sounded tired. Your code works. It's brilliant. But Jasper Vanguard called my CEO personally this morning. Do you know how much weight Jasper throws around in Texas logistics? He threatened to leverage his political contacts to hold up our interstate transport permits if we keep doing business with you. Arlo, please. If you suspend the contract, I lose my primary revenue. That's exactly what they want. I'm sorry, Arlo said quietly. It's business. We have to pause the integration. Call me when the lawsuit is dropped. He hung up. I sat in the dark apartment, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the cheap blinds. Silas hadn't just survived my ambush in the mediation room. He had gone to his father, and they were systematically dismantling my life, piece by piece. No money, no friends. And now, my biggest client was backing away. My phone vibrated on the desk. It was Elena. I picked it up, feeling hollow. They got Arlo, I said before she could speak. Vanguard threatened his CEO. They paused my contract. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice lacked its usual sharp confidence. Maya, she said slowly, I need you to come to my office right now. I can't afford a lift, Elena. what is it? Thad Trask just filed a motion for emergency discovery, she said. They aren't just freezing your money anymore. Jasper hired a private intelligence firm to audit your hardware. They've petitioned the court to physically confiscate your laptop and servers by end of day tomorrow. But that's not the worst part. I closed my eyes. What could possibly be worse? Silas just issued a press release, Elena said. He announced his Series B funding successfully closed this morning, $20 million, and he named his new lead technical director. Who? I asked, a sense of dread washing over me. Your former assistant at the LLC, Elena said. They bought him, Maya. They bought your own developer, and he's claiming he wrote the code for Silas. The phone felt heavy against my ear. Stellan, a 23-year-old kid fresh out of a coding boot camp, who I hired to run basic quality assurance tests. I paid him $35 an hour to find bugs in my subroutines. I bought him lunch on Fridays. He was quiet, always wearing an oversized gray hoodie, constantly stressing about his student loans. They paid his loans, didn't they? I said. My voice sounded flat, completely empty. I don't know the specifics of the payout, Elena said, her tone all business now. But Thad filed a sworn affidavit from Stellan at 9 a.m. In it, Stellan claims Silas Vanguard hired him as an independent contractor a year ago to develop the core architecture of the routing algorithm. He claims you were merely acting as a project manager, facilitating communication between him and Silas while Silas was traveling. He couldn't code his way out of a paper bag, I said, rubbing my forehead. He didn't write the architecture. He just ran stress tests. It doesn't matter what the truth is right now, Maya. It matters what they can put on paper to muddy the waters. With this affidavit, Silas has enough plausible deniability to satisfy his investors. He can claim the IP is disputed, but that the actual creator works for him. It clears the path for the Series B money to clear. And with $20 million in the bank, they will bury us in litigation until you run out of oxygen. I'm coming to the office, I said. How? You said you don't have money for a ride. I'll figure it out. Give me an hour. I hung up the phone. I looked around my dark, sparsely furnished living room. I had a bed frame, a mattress, a desk, and a chair. I walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept the miscellaneous things from my move. I dug around until I found a small velvet box. Inside was a pair of diamond stud earrings. Jasper had given them to me for my 30th birthday. He handed them to me across a white tablecloth at a steakhouse, telling me they were a reward for finally learning how to dress appropriately for their social circle. I hated them. I put them in my pocket. I walked a mile and a half in the blazing Texas heat to a pawn shop on Lamar Boulevard. The air inside smelled like dust and stale cigarettes. The guy behind the counter had a neck tattoo and looked bored when I set the velvet box on the glass. He screwed a jeweler's loop into his eye and examined the stones for maybe 10 seconds. 500, he grunted. They're appraised at 4,000, I said. Then take them to an appraiser, he replied, sliding the box back toward me. 500 cash. That's the offer. Fine. I walked out 10 minutes later with 5 crisp $100 bills. It felt like I was trading away pieces of a life I didn't want anyway, just to buy enough time to survive the day. I ordered a rideshare and sat in the back, watching the heat waves shimmer off the asphalt as we drove toward downtown. Elena's office was on the 14th floor. When I walked in, she was standing by her window, staring out at the skyline. The leather binder was open on her desk, surrounded by a sea of freshly printed legal filings. Sit, she said, not turning around. I dropped my bag and sat in one of the leather chairs. So what's the play? They're taking my laptop tomorrow? Elena turned. She looked exhausted. The discovery order is broad. Jasper's private intelligence firm, a group called Lock Security, will be here at 8 a.m. with a court order. They are authorized to seize any hardware used in the development of the algorithm. Laptops, hard drives, external servers. If you refuse, you'll be held in contempt and arrested. Let them take it, I said. The source code is backed up in the cloud. I use Oz for hosting and a private GitHub repository for version control. Every single keystroke, every commit, every change I ever made is logged with a timestamp. The logs will prove I wrote it. They'll prove Stellan only ever had read access to the core files, and that his commits were strictly limited to the testing environment. The logs don't lie. Alina leaned against her desk. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. We need to export those logs immediately. A complete, immutable mirror of the entire version history. We lodge it with the court today, before they take the hardware. I pulled my laptop out of my bag and opened it on her desk. Give me 10 minutes. I connected to the guest Wi-Fi. I went to the Oz login portal. I typed in my credentials and hit enter. The screen refreshed. A red banner appeared at the top. Access denied. Account suspended due to billing failure. My heart stopped. I stared at the red text. I clicked refresh. The banner stayed. What's wrong? Elena asked, catching the shift in my posture. My Oz account, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's suspended. Why? Because the billing is tied to the LLC's corporate credit card, I said, a cold wave of realization washing over me. The card is linked to the checking account, the one Jasper froze on Friday. When was the billing cycle? The first of the month, I said, checking the date on my screen. Yesterday, I scrambled to open a new tab, my fingers trembling slightly on the trackpad. I navigated to GitHub. I logged in. The repository was still there, but a yellow warning banner sat across the dashboard. Payment failed. Your private repositories will be locked in 12 hours. GitHub is still up, I said, clicking frantically into the repository settings. But it's warning me the payment bounced. If they lock it, I lose access to the logs. I can't export the history without access. Change the payment method, Elena ordered. Put it on my firm's card. We'll expense it later. She reached for her wallet, pulling out a sleek silver corporate card. She read off the numbers as I typed them into the billing portal. I hit submit. The screen loaded for 5 seconds. Payment method rejected. Name on card must match account holder. I tried again. Rejected. They use strict fraud prevention, I said, running a hand through my hair. If the billing name doesn't match the LLC's registered owner, dinner, they flag it, especially on accounts that just bounced a payment. Can you use the cash you got? She asked. For an online cloud hosting invoice? No, I need a card in my name, or the LLC's name, that actually has funds. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. Jasper didn't just freeze my money to starve me out. He knew the auto pays would bounce. He knew the infrastructure holding my proof would lock me out before we got to discovery. Elena walked around the desk and sat in her chair. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Okay, this is bad, but it's not over. We have until 8 tomorrow morning before they take the physical laptop. If we can't get the logs from the cloud, what's on the hard drive? A local clone, I said. But local logs can be spoofed. That's why Thad and Jasper want the laptop. They want to claim I tampered with the timestamps locally to frame Stellan. The cloud logs are the only third-party, verified proof I have. If I lose access to them, then it's your word against a sworn affidavit from a developer, backed by $20 million of venture capital, Elena finished grimly. I looked at my phone sitting on the desk. I need to talk to Stellan. Absolutely not, Elena snapped. If you contact a witness who just filed an affidavit against you, Thad will have you up on witness tampering charges by dinner. You cannot call him. He's a 23-year-old kid, Elena. He's terrified. They probably cornered him, flashed a check for 50 grand to cover his student debt, and told him he'd be sued if he didn't sign. He knows he didn't write that code. If I can just talk to him, I said, no, Maya, I am your attorney, and I am telling you that calling him is a fatal error. I looked at her. Then I picked up my phone, unlocked it, and dialed Stellan's number. Maya, Elena hissed, reaching across the desk. I stood up, stepping out of her reach, and put the phone to my ear. It rang twice. Then, a click. Hello? Stellan's voice was quiet, shaky. Stellan, it's Maya. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Maya, I'm not supposed to talk to you. Their lawyers said. I don't care what Thad Trask said. I interrupted, keeping my voice low and steady. I know they paid your loans. I know Silas offered you a title. But you and I both know you didn't write the architecture for the Vanguard routing system. He showed me the emails. Maya, Stellan blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in a panic. Silas showed me emails between you two from a year ago. He told you what he needed the algorithm to do, and you just coded it for him. He said the IP belonged to his company, and that you were trying to steal it in the divorce to ruin him. He said if I didn't sign the affidavit confirming my role, his father would name me as a co-conspirator in the corporate espionage suit. I froze. Emails? What emails? The ones where he laid out the logistics parameters, Stellan said defensively. The Dallas freight specs. He had time-stamped emails sending you the exact requirements. He proved it to me. Maya, I didn't want to get sued by Jasper Vanguard. I just want a code. I'm sorry. He hung up. The dial tone hummed in my ear. I slowly lowered the phone. Elena was glaring at me. What did he say? I sat back down. My hands felt cold. Silas forged emails. What? Stellan didn't just sign it for the money. Silas showed him emails. Emails between me and Silas from a year ago, where Silas supposedly gave me the exact specifications for the algorithm. He created a fake paper trail, making it look like he directed the project, and he used it to terrify Stellan into signing the affidavit. Elena's expression darkened. Forging electronic communications is a federal offense. Yeah, but how do I prove they're forged? I asked, the sheer scale of Jasper's machinery finally starting to press down on my chest. Silas owns his company's domain. He has full admin access to his corporate mail servers. He can backdate and generate any email he wants internally. To an outside observer, they look completely legitimate. He's building an alternate reality, Elena. Elena stared at the legal pad on her desk. She picked up a pen and started tapping it. Tap, tap, tap. Tomorrow at 8 a.m., lock security comes to your apartment, she said methodically. They will take your laptop. They will submit it to their own forensic team. They will conveniently find evidence of local tampering, which they will present to the judge alongside Stellan's affidavit and the forged emails. By Friday, the judge will grant full summary judgment to Vanguard Holdings, turning the patent over to Silas. Your licensing contracts will be voided, and Arlo's company will sign a new contract directly with Silas. So we lose. Elena stopped tapping the pen. She looked up at me, her eyes narrowing. Not yet. You said Silas owns his corporate mail servers. What about yours? What do you mean? The emails Silas supposedly sent you, Elena said. He would have had to send them to an address. Which email address did he use? I thought about it. I don't know. Stellan didn't say. Probably my old Vanguard personal email, the one tied to the family domain. Jasper insisted we all use it for security. Who manages the Vanguard family domain? Jasper's it guy, I said. A guy named Crispin. He's been with Jasper for 20 years. He runs all the private servers for the estate out of a data center in North Austin. Elena closed her leather binder. We have 16 hours until they take your laptop. We can't access the cloud logs without money. We can't use the local logs without being accused of tampering. But if we can prove the emails Silas used to extort Stellan are forged, the affidavit falls apart. And if the affidavit falls apart, we can petition the judge for an emergency subpoena of Silas's internal servers. You want me to prove the emails are fake, I said. How? Ask Crispin nicely to turn over his boss's server logs? No, Elena said, standing up. She grabbed her suit jacket off the back of her chair. Crispin won't talk to us. But I know someone who used to work for Lock Security before she got tired of Jasper Vanguard's dirty work. She owes me a favor. For what? For keeping her out of federal prison 5 years ago, Elena said smoothly. She slipped her arms into her jacket. Let's go. We're going to take a little drive up to Georgetown. I grabbed my laptop and shoved it into my bag. Who are we going to see? Her name is Sable, Elena said as we walked out of the office. And if anyone knows how to prove Jasper Vanguard is fabricating digital evidence, it's the woman who used to do it for him. I slowly lowered the phone. It sat on the diner table, a lifeless piece of glass and metal next to the cashier's check that was now essentially a piece of counterfeit paper. Elena was staring at me. She had stopped typing. What did he say? Luz sold us out, I said. My voice didn't even shake. I was too numb numb for it to shake. Jasper bought her remaining shares at a 30% premium. She resigned from the board at 5:15. The escrow protocol froze her accounts. Elena looked at the cashier's check. The color drained from her face, replaced by a sudden, sharp panic I had never seen in her before. The bond, Elena whispered. Her hands flew to her laptop keyboard. She frantically clicked through the court's e-filing portal. If the clerk's office attempts to clear a $75,000 bond tomorrow morning and it bounces, the judge won't just deny the stay of discovery. He'll hold us in contempt for filing a fraudulent instrument. It could get me disbarred. Can you cancel it? I'm trying, Elena muttered, her eyes locked on the screen. The system batches filings at the top of the hour. Come on, come on. She hit a key, held her breath, and slumped back against the vinyl booth. Okay, it's withdrawn. The motion is canceled. She closed her laptop with a heavy thud. The diner suddenly felt entirely too quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights above us sounded like a flatline. So there's no stay, I said. There's no stay, Elena confirmed, rubbing her temples. There's no bond. There are no global relay logs. And tomorrow at 8 a.m., Lock Security is going to knock on your door, and you are going to hand them your laptop, your external hard drives, and any physical media in your apartment. You will give them your administrative passwords. You will smile, and you will let them walk away with your life's work. If you try to hide it, smash it, or wipe the drive, Thad Trask will have you arrested for spoliation of evidence before lunch. I looked out the diner window. The streetlights were flickering on across the humid Austin dusk. I had fought so hard. I had built a $12 million company in the shadows, secured a federal patent, and outmaneuvered Silas in mediation. And it hadn't mattered at all. Jasper Vanguard didn't play by the rules of the board. He owned the board. We drove back to my apartment in silence. Elena dropped me off at the curb. She told me to get some sleep and that she would be there at 7:30 a.m. to supervise the hardware transfer. My apartment was stifling. I hadn't turned the air conditioning on to save money. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at my code editor. Millions of lines of elegant, efficient logic. It was beautiful. And in 9 hours, it was going to belong to Silas. At 11:15 p.m., there was a soft knock at my door. I froze. My first thought was that Lock Security had shown up early. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Nadia. She was wearing a silk evening dress, her makeup slightly smudged under her eyes. She was holding a clutch purse with both hands, gripping it so tightly her knuckles were white. I unlocked the door and pulled it open just a few inches. What do you want, Nadia? She flinched at my tone. Maya, can I come in? Please, just for a minute. You told me to stay away from you, I said, my hand resting heavily on the doorknob. You called me a liar in the middle of a coffee shop. I know, she whispered, her voice cracking. I know, and I am so sorry. Please, Maya. My husband is waiting in the car. I shouldn't even be here. If Silas finds out I came to see you, I stared at her for a long moment. Then I pulled the door open and stepped back. Nadia walked into the dark, bare living room. She looked at the single mattress on the floor, the cheap desk, the utter lack of anything that resembled the life I used to have. A fresh wave of guilt washed over her face. Where did you come from? I asked, crossing my arms. The Vanguard estate, Nadia said. Jasper hosted a private dinner tonight, a victory party for the Series B funding closing tomorrow. How nice for them. Maya, listen to me, Nadia said, stepping closer. Bowen and I were there. Everyone was drinking. Silas was holding court, bragging about how he finally cornered you. He was laughing about some check bouncing. But Stellan was there. Too Stellan, I repeated, feeling a surge of bitter anger. The genius who supposedly wrote my algorithm. He's a wreck, Maya, Nadia said, her words rushing out. Stellan was drinking heavily. He practically ran to the guest bathroom an hour ago, and Bowen went in to check on him. Stellan was having a full-blown panic attack on the floor. Bowen asked him what was wrong, and Stellan just started sobbing. Nadia swallowed hard. The investors aren't just signing paperwork tomorrow morning. They demanded a live technical demonstration at 10:00 a.m., a stress test of the routing algorithm running on a live encrypted dataset, and Stellan can't get the build to compile. I blinked. What? Stellan told Bowen the local repository Silas gave him is broken. It crashes every time they try to run a query larger than 10 trucks. Stellan said there's a catastrophic memory leak, and he doesn't know how to fix it because he doesn't understand the underlying architecture. Nadia looked at me. Because he didn't write it. You did. A slow, strange heat began to spread through my chest. Bowen told Silas. Nadia continued. Silas dragged Stellan into the hallway. I was standing near the pantry. I heard them. Silas was furious, but he told Stellan to shut up and just hold it together until the morning. Silas said, Locke is grabbing her physical machine at 8. She's been running the clients flawlessly all week. The patched code is on her local drive. We take her machine, we clone the patched environment, and we run the demo off her hardware. Then we wipe it and hand the laptop to the court. Nadia reached out and touched my arm. They don't just want your laptop for discovery, Maya. They are desperate for it. If they don't get your patched version, the demo fails tomorrow. The investors will see the software is a fraud, and the 20 million falls through. I stared past Nadia, looking at my laptop sitting on the desk. The memory leaked 3 weeks ago, during the beta expansion. I noticed a severe memory allocation error in the core routing engine when it processed more than 50 concurrent geographic nodes. It was a brutal bug. I spent 3 sleepless nights rewriting the garbage collection protocol on my local machine. I pushed the fix to my Oz production servers to keep my clients running smoothly, but I never pushed that specific patch back to the shared local home network repository. The repository Silas had scraped and stolen was the old broken build. He was holding $20 million in venture capital hostage to a piece of software that would fundamentally implode if anyone actually tried to use it. And Stellan, a 23-year-old QA tester, possessed absolutely none of the engineering skills required to rewrite the garbage collection logic overnight. They need my laptop to save their own demo, I whispered. Nadia nodded, tears spilling over her eyelashes. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. Bowen is terrified. He's looking for a new job starting tomorrow. Silas is a sociopath. Maya, you have to destroy that laptop. Throw it in the river. Burn it. I can't, I said, my mind racing. There's a court order. If I destroy it, I go to prison for tampering with evidence. I have to hand it to them intact. But if you give it to them, they'll steal your patch. They'll run the demo and win. Nadia, I said softly, looking back at her. Thank you for coming here, for telling me this. What are you going to do? I'm going to comply with the court order, I said. I walked her to the door. She hugged me, a tight, desperate squeeze, and slipped out into the hallway. I locked the door. I walked over to my desk and sat down. I cracked my knuckles. I couldn't delete the code. I couldn't hide the laptop. I couldn't password lock them out of the operating system. I had to hand them a fully functional, perfectly patched, flawlessly compiling local environment. I had to hand them the exact weapon they needed to secure their $20 million. But it was my software. I built it. I owned the architecture. I opened the code editor. I navigated to the front-end rendering module, the part of the software that generated the beautiful, sleek visual maps and data readouts for the end user, the exact interface Stellan would have to project onto a massive screen in a Vanguard conference room for the investors. I didn't break the code. I didn't sabotage the logic. I just updated the visual styling. I opened the core cascading style sheets and the primary rendering script. I wrote a 40-line function that triggered only when the software processed a dataset larger than 50 nodes, the exact threshold of a Series B stress test. When that threshold was hit, the UI wouldn't just display the routing maps. It would dynamically render a massive, translucent, unclosable overlay across the entire user interface. The overlay consisted of a single string of text, hard-coded in a bold 80-point font, tiled diagonally across the screen. Proprietary software of Maya Vanguard. Patent no. 11,489,203. Unauthorized commercial use, strictly prohibited. I embedded the function deep into the core dependency tree. I tied the execution of the watermark directly to the mathematical output of the routing algorithm itself. If Stellan found it tomorrow morning and tried to simply delete the watermark code, he would sever the dependency chain. The algorithm would fail to compile entirely, crashing the system before the demo even started. To remove the watermark, you had to completely rewrite the front-end rendering logic from scratch, a task that would take a senior engineer 3 days. Stellan had 3 hours. I saved the files. I ran a local build. I fed it a test dataset of 60 nodes. The screen flickered, the map rendered beautifully, and instantly, my name and patent number plastered across the screen in bold, unyielding letters, permanently branding the output. I closed the laptop. I finally went to sleep. At 7:45 a.m., Elena arrived at my apartment. She looked exhausted, holding 2 cups of coffee. You ready? She asked gently, looking at the laptop sitting closed on the kitchen counter. I'm ready, I said. At exactly 8 a.m., there was a sharp, authoritative knock on the door. Elena opened it. 2 men in identical navy blue polo shirts and khaki pants stood in the hallway. They didn't look like thugs. They looked like it professionals. One of them held a clipboard. The other carried a heavy padded Pelican case. Maya Vanguard? The man with the clipboard asked. I'm with Lock Security. We are executing a civil order for the retrieval and preservation of electronic devices. He handed Elena a copy of the judge's order. She reviewed it in silence, then nodded. I walked to the counter, picked up my laptop and its charger, and handed it to the man with the Pelican case. The administrative password is taped to the bottom, I said smoothly, as ordered by the court. The local environment is fully intact. The man checked the tape, nodded, and placed the laptop carefully into the foam-lined case. He snapped the heavy latches shut. It sounded like a cell door locking. Thank you for your cooperation, the first man said. They turned and walked down the hallway. Elena closed the door and locked it. She leaned against the wood and let out a long, ragged breath. Well, Elena said, looking at the empty spot on the counter. That's it. They have the physical evidence. Now we just have to pray the judge grants our request for a neutral auditor before Silas's team finds the forged emails on your hard drive. They aren't going to look for the emails this morning, I said, picking up my coffee. Elena frowned. What? I told her about Nadia's visit. I told her about the memory leak, Stellan's panic attack, and the 10 a.m. investor demo. As I explained the dependency-locked watermark I had buried in the code, Elena's eyes widened. A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face. You watermarked the runtime environment? Elena laughed in disbelief. Maya, you handed them a Trojan horse. I handed them exactly what the court demanded. I corrected, taking a sip of coffee. A fully functional, untampered local build of my software. If Silas Vanguard wants to use my laptop to run a commercial demo for his investors, he is legally welcome to display my patent number to the entire room. Elena looked at her watch. It was 8:30 a.m. Lock Security delivers the laptop to Vanguard Holdings by 9. Elena calculated, her energy suddenly returning. Stellan boots it up, realizes the patch is there, and breathes a sigh of relief. He hooks it up to the conference room projector at 10, and the second he runs the live stress test, the investors see exactly who owns the company. I finished. We sat at my small kitchen table, watching the clock tick on the wall. 9 a.m., 9:30 a.m., 9:45 a.m. The anticipation was a physical weight in the room. I imagined Silas in his custom-tailored suit, shaking hands with the venture capitalists. I imagined Jasper sitting at the head of the mahogany table, radiating power and control. I imagined Stellan, sweating through his shirt, typing in my administrative password and launching the application. At 10:14 a.m., Elena's cell phone rang. It wasn't Silas. It wasn't Thad Trask. Elena looked at the caller ID and frowned. It's Arlo Farrow. My stomach gave a sharp, involuntary lurch. Arlo was my anchor client in Dallas, the one who had paused our contract 2 days ago because Jasper threatened his CEO. Put it on speaker, I said. Elena answered and set the phone on the table. Arlo, you're on speaker with Maya. Maya, Arlo said. His voice was heavy. grumpy. He sounded like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. I need to tell you something before you read it in the industry trades this afternoon. What is it? I asked. Did the Vanguard demo fail? Did Silas call you? I don't care about Silas's demo, Arlo said flatly. Maya, Jasper Vanguard didn't just threaten my CEO to get us to pause your contract. I know, I said. He threatened your interstate transport permits. No, you don't understand, Arlo interrupted. That was just the opening move to drive our stock price down over the weekend. While everyone was looking at your divorce, Jasper's private equity firm executed a hostile takeover. The kitchen went dead silent. A what? Elena asked, leaning closer to the phone. Vanguard Holdings just bought a 51% controlling stake in our freight company, Arlo said, his voice echoing out of the small speaker. The ink dried an hour ago. Jasper Vanguard practically owns us now, and his first act as majority shareholder was just handed down to my department. I couldn't breathe. Arlo, he didn't just officially terminate your licensing contract, Maya, Arlo said, the apology thick in his throat. Jasper just ordered my engineering team to hand over all of the proprietary beta logs you generated on our servers for the last 6 months. He's seizing the data you used to train the AI, and because he owns the company now, it's completely legal. I stared at the phone. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Elena reached out and tapped the red button, ending the call. The silence that followed was absolute. He bought the company, I whispered, the reality finally piercing through the adrenaline. He bought an entire freight logistics company just to legally confiscate my training logs. Elena stood up and paced the short length of my kitchen. It's a classic Jasper Vanguard maneuver. He couldn't win the IP on a straight patent claim, so he's attacking the foundation. Machine learning algorithms are useless without the datasets they were trained on. By seizing the beta logs, he's basically seizing the brain of your software. If he has the data, he can hire a dozen engineers to reverse engineer a competing algorithm and claim parallel development. He's trying to build a legal bypass around your patent. Arlo was my anchor, I said, rubbing my face. If Jasper owns the company, my licensing contract is officially dead. I have zero revenue. And Arlo, hostile takeovers usually involve cleaning house, Elena said grimly. If Arlo tipped you off, he's probably packing his desk right now. Before I could process the guilt of dragging Arlo down with me, Elena's phone rang again. She looked at the screen, her jaw tightening. Thad Trask, she said. She accepted the call and put it on speaker. Good morning, Thad. I imagine you're calling to confirm receipt of my client's laptop? Cut the crap, Elena. Thad's voice barked through the speaker. He didn't sound bored anymore. He sounded breathless, furious, and slightly panicked. What did your client do to the local build? Elena leaned over the table, a shark smelling blood. My client complied entirely with the court order, Thad. She handed over a fully functional, intact local environment. Did you run into a technical issue? Don't play games with me, Thad snarled. Stellan booted the machine in the Vanguard conference room at 10 o'clock. The moment he ran the live geographic query for the investors, the entire rendering module locked up. A giant, unclosable watermark hijacked the screen. It projected your client's name and a federal patent number onto a 70-inch monitor in front of 3 senior partners from a major venture firm. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It worked. That sounds like a front-end UI feature, Thad, Elena said smoothly. Standard protocol for proprietary beta software. If Silas Vanguard was attempting to display my client's patented software as his own to secure $20 million, that sounds like a wire fraud problem, not a code problem. The investors walked, Thad yelled, his polished veneer completely gone. They stood up, packed their briefcases, and walked out of the building. The Series B funding is dead. Silas's bridge loan defaults in 3 weeks. His company is functionally insolvent as of this minute. Then I suggest he start liquidating his office furniture, Elena said. Are we done here? No, we are not done, Thad hissed. Jasper is amending the civil suit as we speak. We aren't just freezing her assets anymore. We are suing Maya Vanguard for $20 million in tortious interference and malicious sabotage of corporate value. We are going to take everything she has, Elena. We will garnish her wages for the rest of her natural life. She won't be able to buy a cup of coffee without Jasper Vanguard taking a cut. The line went dead. Elena slowly picked up her phone. She looked at me. The victory of the ruined demo was real. Silas had been publicly exposed and stripped of his funding, but the aftertaste was absolute ash. Jasper Vanguard didn't care that his son was a fraud. He only cared that someone had embarrassed his family. $20 million, I said, the number sounding absurd in my empty, cheap apartment. I have $400 in my pocket. It's a scare tactic, Elena said, though she sounded tired. It's a frivolous amendment, but they have the capital to keep filing motions until we bleed to death on legal fees. I need to get back to the office and start drafting a motion to dismiss the tortious interference claim. Do not leave this apartment. Do not talk to anyone. She gathered her things and left. The heavy thud of the front door closing echoed in the bare living room. I was completely alone. I didn't have my laptop. I didn't have my clients. I didn't have my friends. Silas and Jasper had systematically stripped me down to the studs. I sat on my mattress for 2 hours, watching the harsh Texas sunlight creep across the cheap linoleum floor. I felt a dangerous, creeping apathy settling over me, the kind of exhaustion that makes you want to just lie down and let the steamroller finish the job. My phone buzzed on the floor next to me. I stared at it. I expected it to be a news alert about Silas's company, or maybe a text from Elena, but it was a direct message on LinkedIn. I tapped the notification. It was from Arlo Farrow. Maya, I'm at the airport. I'm flying out to Denver to stay with my sister for a few weeks until this cools down. Vanguard security escorted me out of the building at 10:30, but they were slow. I sat up, my pulse quickening. I typed back, what do you mean they were slow? The 3 little typing dots bubbled on the screen for what felt like an eternity. Jasper's tech guys didn't take physical control of our Dallas servers until noon. I knew they were coming the second the buyout hit the wire. Before they walked onto the floor, I pulled a physical mirror of your entire beta log history. history. The raw routing data, the AI training inputs, the efficiency outputs, everything. My breath caught in my throat. The data Jasper bought the company to steal. The very foundation of my algorithm's intelligence. Do you have it? I typed, my thumbs clumsy on the glass screen. I put the encrypted flash drive in a locker at the Greyhound station downtown. Arlo wrote, Locker 412. The code is your old office extension. Maya, this is stolen property now. Jasper owns the company, which means he owns that data. If you use it and they catch you, it's corporate espionage. Real jail time. I'm giving this to you because Vanguard is a monster, and I hate what he did to my company. But be careful. I'm out. His profile status flipped from green to offline. I stared at the screen. Locker 412. If Jasper had the data on his servers, he could train a new model and bury me. But if I had a copy of the logs, I could prove my AI was the only architecture capable of processing that specific dataset with a 99% efficiency rate. I could take it to a neutral technical auditor. It was the missing link I needed to cement my patent's validity in court. But Arlo was right. Taking it was a crime. Taking it crossed the line from a civil dispute into a criminal act. Jasper Vanguard was actively looking for an excuse to put me in handcuffs. I looked at the 4 crisp $100 bills sitting on my desk from the pawn shop. I grabbed my keys, shoved the cash into my pocket, and walked out the door. The downtown Greyhound station was a brutalist concrete building that smelled of diesel fumes, stale pretzels, and desperation. The afternoon heat was suffocating, pressing down on the city like a wet wool blanket. I walked through the sliding glass doors, keeping my head down. The station was crowded with people hauling overstuffed duffel bags and screaming children. I navigated through the chaotic waiting area toward the bank of rusted orange lockers against the far wall. Locker 412. I stood in front of it. The metal was scratched and dented. The electronic keypad blinked a dull red. My old office extension. 8014. I raised my hand. My fingers were trembling slightly. If I punched the code, I was stealing from Vanguard Holdings. I was breaking the law. I was giving Jasper exactly what he needed to destroy me if I slipped up even once. I thought about Silas, standing in his tailored suit, laughing in my face while he stole 3 years of my life. I thought about the forged emails he used to terrify Stellan. I punched the numbers. 8014. The keypad beeped green. The heavy metal door popped open with a metallic clack. Inside, sitting in the center of the dusty metal shelf, was a standard black USB drive. I reached in, grabbed it, and dropped it into my jeans pocket. I slammed the locker shut and turned around to leave. Maya, my blood ran instantly cold. I froze. I slowly turned my head toward the sound of the voice. Standing 10 feet away, leaning against a pillar near the ticketing counter, was Bowen, Nadia's husband. He was wearing a tailored gray suit, totally out of place in the grimy bus terminal. He wasn't smiling. He looked exhausted, the bags under his eyes prominent in the harsh fluorescent lighting. I took a step backward, my hand instinctively pressing against the pocket holding the USB drive. Bowen, what are you doing here? He pushed off the pillar and walked slowly toward me. I work in commercial real estate, Maya. I had a site visit 2 blocks from here. I was walking back to my car when I saw you walking into the station. Are you following me? I asked, my voice rising in panic. No, Bowen said, holding up his hands defensively. I swear, it was a coincidence. But when I saw you, I had to talk to you. He stopped a few feet away, glancing nervously over his shoulder at the crowds of travelers. Nadia told me she went to your apartment last night, Bowen said, his voice dropping to a low, tight murmur. She told me you knew about the demo, about Stellan. I don't have anything to say to you, Bowen, I said, trying to step around him. Your wife made it very clear where you both stand. Maya, wait, Bowen said, stepping into my path. You don't understand what happened this morning. The demo crashed. It was a disaster. The Sequoia partners walked out. Silas lost his mind. I said coldly. You didn't hear this, Bowen said. He looked terrified. Silas came back to the estate. Jasper was there. I was in the library waiting to give Silas some commercial lease paperwork. They didn't know I was in the room. Bowen swallowed hard. Jasper didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He just looked at Silas and said, you let a freelancer humiliate us in front of Sequoia Capital. You are a liability, Silas. And then Jasper picked up his phone and called Crispin. Crispin, Jasper's private director, the man who managed the Vanguard family servers. What did he tell Crispin to do? I asked, the fear suddenly gripping my chest. He told Crispin to scrub the private family servers. Bowen whispered. He told him to delete the backdated email trails. All of them. He told him to wipe Silas's corporate laptop, bleach the hard drives, and issue a company-wide directive that Silas Vanguard is no longer the CEO of the startup. I stared at him. Jasper fired his own son? Jasper is severing ties, Bowen said. He is erasing any digital evidence that links Vanguard Holdings to Silas's fraud. He's making it so that if the SEC or a judge comes knocking, Silas takes the fall alone. But it's worse than that, Maya. Bowen looked at my pocket. Jasper knows Arlo Farrow pulled a backup of the beta logs before the Dallas servers were secured. They found the access logs. Jasper has lock security looking for Arlo right now. If they find Arlo, they find out he gave it to you. He's on a plane to Denver. I lied smoothly, keeping my face blank. Bowen shook his head. Maya, I don't care about the logs. I care about Nadia. I care about my family. Jasper Vanguard destroys anything that threatens his reputation. And right now, you are the biggest threat to his reputation in Austin. I just came to tell you to run, because whatever you're planning, Jasper is already 3 steps ahead of you. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd near the ticketing kiosks. I stood in the middle of the bus terminal, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. Jasper was wiping the servers. He was destroying the forged emails Silas had used to blackmail Stellan. Without those emails, I had no proof Silas had coerced the affidavit, and Jasper was hunting the data I had just stolen. I walked out of the terminal and into the blinding heat. I didn't call a rideshare. I walked the 2 miles to the public library, my mind racing through a dozen different scenarios, none of them ending well. I walked into into the air-conditioned quiet of the library, found an empty public terminal in the back corner, and sat down. I pulled the USB drive out of my pocket and set it on the desk. I couldn't plug it in. The public computers monitored file transfers. If lock security was monitoring the data signature, plugging it into a municipal network would flag my exact location instantly. I needed a clean machine. I needed an air-gapped laptop, completely disconnected from the internet, to open the drive and analyze the data without triggering a digital tripwire. And I had no money to buy one. I rested my head against the cool metal casing of the public monitor. I was exhausted. I was so incredibly tired of fighting ghosts and billionaires. Excuse me. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs. Standing next to the desk was a young man in an oversized gray hoodie. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His hands were jammed deep into his pockets, and his shoulders were hunched defensively. It was Stellan. I stared at him, my mouth dry. How did you find me? I went to your apartment, Stellan said, his voice barely a whisper. Your neighbor said she saw you walking toward Lamar Boulevard. I just guessed. You used to come to this library to read when the Wi-Fi went down at the house. You need to leave, I said, grabbing the USB drive and shoving it back into my pocket. If Thad Trask finds out you're talking to me, he'll have me arrested for witness tampering, and he'll ruin you. They already ruined me, Stellan said. He pulled up a chair and sat down heavily next to me. Silas fired me an hour ago. He said I botched the demo. He said I was legally liable for the loss of the Series B funding because I didn't catch the watermark in the QA suite. You signed a false affidavit, Stellan, I said, my voice hardening. You swore under penalty of perjury that you wrote my architecture. You helped them steal my company. You don't get to play the victim. Stellan flinched. I know I did. I was terrified, Maya. Silas showed me those emails. He told me if I didn't sign, Jasper would sue me into bankruptcy. Those emails were forged, I hissed, leaning in so the librarian at the front desk wouldn't hear. Silas backdated them on his internal server. He manipulated you. I know, Stellan whispered. I stopped. You know. Stellan nodded slowly, his eyes locked on the scuffed carpet. When the demo crashed today, Silas lost his mind. He threw a chair across the boardroom. The investors left, and he dragged me into his office. He was screaming at me. He opened his laptop to show me the emails again, to prove he had given me the exact specs, to blame me for not following them. Stellan looked up at me, his eyes wide and hollow. But when he opened his mail client, he was sloppy, Maya. He had the admin console open in another tab. I saw the metadata editor. I saw the script he used to alter the server timestamps. I felt a sudden, sharp jolt of electricity run down my spine. You saw the admin script? I took a picture of it, Stellan said. He pulled his phone out of his hoodie pocket. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He tapped the screen a few times and slid the phone across the desk toward me. I looked at the screen. It was a blurry, hastily taken photograph of Silas's laptop screen. But the text was legible. It was a back-end server command line interface. And right there, highlighted in the command history, was a manual override script rewriting the creation dates of 4 specific email threads. Threads between Silas and my old Vanguard email address. It was absolute, undeniable proof of digital forgery. Stellan, I breathed, staring at the photo. Do you have any idea what this is? It's proof he lied, Stellan said miserably. But it doesn't matter. Jasper's it guy, Crispin, remotely wiped Silas's laptop 20 minutes after I took that picture. They bleached the server. The original metadata is gone. This picture is all that's left. Send it to me, I commanded. I can't, Stellan said, pulling the phone back. Maya, if I give this to you, and you use it in court, I go to prison for perjury. I swore those emails were real. I signed a sworn affidavit. If you don't give it to me, Jasper Vanguard wins, I said, my voice dropping to a fierce, desperate whisper. He keeps my patent. He keeps your ruined reputation. He walks away clean, and you spend the rest of your life knowing you helped a sociopath steal my life's work. Stellan stared at the photo on his screen. The library was incredibly quiet. The only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant beep of a barcode scanner. I need an immunity agreement, Stellan said finally. He didn't look up. If I give you this, your lawyer has to promise me she can get the DA to grant me immunity for the false affidavit. I can't go to jail, Maya. My mom is sick. I can't. I looked at this kid. He was 23, drowning in student debt, bullied by billionaires, and terrified out of his mind. He had betrayed me, but he was just collateral damage in Jasper's war. I'll call Elena, I said. I stood up, pulling my phone out of my pocket. I walked away from the desks, moving toward the dusty shelves of the reference section where no one was sitting. I dialed Elena's number. She picked up on the first ring. Did you leave your apartment? Yes, I said quickly. Listen to me. I have Stellan. He's with me right now. Maya, what the hell did I tell you about witness tampering? Elena practically shouted. He found me, I said. And he has a photograph of Silas's server admin console. It proves the emails were manually backdated. But Jasper already wiped the physical servers. The photo is the only proof left. Elena was silent for a long 3 seconds. The anger vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating silence of a trial lawyer seeing a vulnerability in the armor. He wants immunity, I said into the silence, for the perjury on the affidavit. Can we do it? I can leverage the photo to get the civil judge to toss the affidavit, Elena said, thinking out loud. Criminal immunity is harder, but if we offer the DA a clean wire fraud case against Silas Vanguard, they might bite. But a photograph of a screen is circumstantial. Maya Thad will argue it's photoshopped. We need the metadata from the photo itself to prove it was taken inside the Vanguard offices this morning. He's right here. I'll have him text it to you. Don't let him send it over a cellular network, Elena commanded. If Jasper is monitoring Silas's outgoing traffic, they might catch the packet transfer. Have him airdrop it to you directly, then bring your phone to my office. We will extract the metadata locally. Okay, I said. I'm on my way. I hung up and walked back to the public terminals. Stellan was gone. The chair was pushed back. The desk was empty. Stellan? I said, looking around the rows of computers. Nothing. Nothing. I walked quickly down the aisle, scanning the reading tables and the study carrels. The library wasn't that big. I checked the lobby, the restrooms, the stairwell. He had vanished completely. I ran outside, the Texas heat slamming into me. I looked up and down the street. Cars crawled along Lamar Boulevard. Pedestrians waited at the crosswalks. But the gray hoodie was nowhere to be seen. My phone vibrated in my hand. It was a text message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry, Maya. I saw lock security walking into the library lobby. They followed me. I had to run. I deleted the photo. I can't do this." I stared at the text message. The small screen blurred for a second as a wave of absolute exhaustion washed over me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone against the brick wall of the library. Stellan was gone. The photo was gone. The only piece of hard, undeniable evidence that Silas had forged those emails was deleted by a terrified 23-year-old in a gray hoodie who just wanted to go home. I looked toward the front entrance of the library. Through the glass doors, I saw a man in a navy blue polo shirt standing near the circulation desk. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't a hitman. He was just a private investigator on Jasper Vanguard's payroll, scanning the room. A guy getting paid $80 an hour to serve subpoenas and take photos. But to Stellan, he was the Grim Reaper. I slipped my phone into my pocket, kept my head down, and walked out the side exit. The heavy metal door clicked shut behind me, dumping me into the alleyway. The heat was suffocating. I leaned against the hot brick and tried to slow my breathing. I had the USB drive. I had the beta logs, but I still didn't have a computer. I pulled out the $400 from the pawn shop. It wasn't enough to buy a new laptop, not even a cheap one from a big box store, once you factored in the sales tax. And I couldn't use a credit card. I needed a machine, fast, and completely off the grid. I walked 3 blocks to a bus stop and paid $2 in exact change. I rode the city bus east, watching the sleek glass high-rises of downtown Austin fade into older, flatter neighborhoods. I got off at East 6th Street, near the train tracks. It was quieter here. The air smelled of exhaust and barbecue. I walked half a block to a storefront with a faded yellow awning that read Remy's Board and Solder. I pushed the door open. The bell above it chimed, a sharp, metallic ring. The shop was a chaotic graveyard of electronics. Motherboards, tangled wires, half-assembled drones, and stacks of old monitors covered every flat surface. The air conditioning was weak, and the room smelled strongly of ozone and flux paste. Remy was sitting behind the counter on a tall stool, wearing a magnifying visor and meticulously soldering a tiny capacitor onto a green circuit board. She didn't look up. "I'm closed for walk-ins," Remy said, her voice raspy from years of chain smoking before she quit. "Unless you have a ticket number, come back tomorrow." "I don't have a ticket, Remy," I said. She stopped the soldering iron. She pushed the visor up onto her forehead, revealing dark, heavy-set eyes and a mess of short, curly black hair. She looked at me. Really looked at me. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. Remy was my roommate in my early 20s, back when I was pulling all-nighters doing freelance data entry and she was fixing broken iPhones out of our living room to pay rent. When I married Silas, Remy came to the wedding, drank 3 glasses of free champagne, told me Silas had the eyes of a sociopath, and left before the cake was cut. We just drifted apart after that. She didn't fit into the Vanguard Country Club dinners, and Silas made sure I knew it. "Maya," she said. She set the iron down in its cradle. "You look like hell." "I know. I read about the divorce in the Austin Business Journal," she said, leaning on the counter. "They made it sound like you lost your mind and tried to hold his startup hostage. They have a very good PR firm." "Yeah, I figured," Remy said. She wiped her hands on a shop rag. "Silas always struck me as the kind of guy who would steal your watch and then help you look for it." "What do you need?" "I need a laptop," I said. "Something old. Something with a clean operating system that hasn't been connected to a Wi-Fi network in at least 5 years. No tracking software, no background telemetry, no cloud autosync. Totally air-gapped." Remy raised an eyebrow. "Corporate espionage or running from the feds?" "Neither. I'm just trying to read a flash drive without my ex-father-in-law's security firm geolocating my IP address." Remy stared at me for a long moment. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer pity. That's why I came to her. She turned around and walked to a metal storage rack in the back of the shop. She rummaged through a stack of plastic bins, pulling out a heavy matte black ThinkPad that looked like it belonged in a 2012 corporate IT department. She set it on the counter with a heavy thud. "ThinkPad T430, Remy said, booting it up. The screen flickered to life, showing a bare-bones Linux desktop. "I stripped the Wi-Fi card out of the motherboard myself last year for parts. It literally lacks the physical hardware to connect to the internet. The battery holds a charge for about 20 minutes, so keep it plugged into the wall." "How much?" I asked, pulling the wad of hundreds out of my pocket. Remy looked at the cash, then pushed my hand away. "Keep it. You need it more than I do right now. Just don't bring the heat to my shop. Take it to the back room. There's a desk next to the mini fridge." "Thank you, Remy. Don't thank me yet," she muttered, pulling her visor back down. "Just figure out how to ruin that guy." I carried the heavy laptop into the back room. It was cramped and smelled like old coffee. I cleared a space on a small folding table, plugged the power cord into a surge protector, and sat down on a milk crate. My hands were shaking as I pulled the black USB drive from my pocket. This was it, the absolute core of my work, the proof of concept that justified a $12 million valuation. If Jasper Vanguard successfully wiped these logs from the Dallas servers, this piece of plastic was the only existing copy in the world. I slid the drive into the USB port. The screen blinked. A folder appeared on the desktop. I opened it. It was exactly what Arlo promised. Gigabytes of raw CSV files, geographic node maps, timestamped efficiency outputs, and the machine learning weight adjustments my algorithm had made over 6 months of live testing. It was indisputable proof that my software, the architecture Silas claimed Stellan built, was processing data at a scale Stellan couldn't even comprehend. But as I scrolled past the data arrays, I noticed a second folder at the very bottom of the directory. It was labeled simply Q3_discrepancy_review. I frowned. Arlo hadn't mentioned a secondary folder. I clicked it. Inside was a single PDF document. It wasn't a technical log. It was an internal auditing report from the Dallas Freight Company, dated 8 months ago, right around the time Silas first started getting curious about my little hobby in the basement. I opened the document and started reading. The blood slowly drained from my face. It was an internal investigation led by Arlo's CEO. 8 months ago, the freight company had suffered a catastrophic logistical collapse in their western division. Trucks were sent to dead zones, perishables spoiled in transit, and fuel costs skyrocketed. The failure had cost the company nearly $3.2 million in a single quarter. The cause of the collapse? The company had briefly tested a piece of third-party routing software, a beta test. I looked at the vendor name listed in the audit, Vanguard Logistics Solutions, Silas's company. I read the paragraphs twice to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. 8 months ago, Silas had pitched his own version of a routing algorithm to the same Dallas Freight Company. He had tried to build it himself, using cheap offshore developers, to prove to his father that he could secure a massive enterprise contract. It was a complete disaster. Silas's code failed spectacularly on a live commercial grid, causing millions in damages. The freight company had threatened to sue Silas for gross negligence and breach of contract, but the lawsuit never happened. The last page of the PDF was a scanned settlement agreement. Jasper Vanguard had quietly stepped in and paid the Dallas Freight Company $4 million out of his own private equity fund to cover the damages and bury the audit. An ironclad non-disclosure agreement was signed. Silas's failure was erased from the public record. I sat back on the milk crate, the plastic digging into my spine. Suddenly, everything made sense. Silas didn't steal my code just because he was greedy. He stole it because he was desperate. He had promised his father and his initial seed investors a revolutionary algorithm. When his own version spectacularly failed, Jasper had to bail him out to save the family name. The pressure on Silas to deliver a working product must have been astronomical. And then, he saw my screen. He saw my algorithm, the one I built in his basement, running flawlessly. He didn't just steal it to get rich. He stole it to cover up his own multi-million-dollar failure. And Jasper didn't buy the Dallas Freight Company today just to seize my training logs. He bought the company to legally acquire and destroy this exact audit report. If the SEC or the venture capitalists found out that Silas's previous software version had caused a $4 million disaster, Silas wouldn't just lose his Series B funding. He would be investigated for defrauding his current investors by hiding material liabilities. Jasper wasn't just starving me out to protect his son's pride. He was orchestrating a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate cover-up, and I was holding the evidence. My phone vibrated in my pocket, startling me so badly I nearly knocked the heavy ThinkPad off the table. I pulled it out. The screen showed an unknown number. Not a blocked caller ID, just a standard Austin area code I didn't recognize. I hesitated. I shouldn't answer. Elena told me not to talk to anyone. The phone kept vibrating. It felt heavy in my hand. I pressed accept and brought the phone to my ear. I didn't say anything. Maya, the voice was smooth, quiet, and deeply resonant. It was the voice of a man who never had to raise it to get exactly what he wanted. Jasper Vanguard. My throat tightened. How did you get this number? I pay a lot of money to people whose sole job is to know how to reach people, Jasper said politely. He didn't sound angry. He sounded like a man ordering a moderately expensive bottle of wine. I hope I'm not interrupting. I have nothing to say to you, Jasper. My lawyer handles my communications. Elena is a very capable attorney, Jasper agreed. But lawyers have a bad habit of escalating simple matters into expensive spectacles. I prefer to handle family matters personally. And despite everything, Maya, you were family. Until you decided to freeze my bank accounts and steal my company, I protected my son's interests, just as you are attempting to protect yours. It's simply business. But the business is getting sloppy. Jasper paused, and I heard the faint clinking of ice in a glass. Arlo Farrow made a very foolish decision this morning. He accessed proprietary corporate servers during a transition of ownership. He downloaded property that belongs to me, and my security team believes he passed that property to you. I kept my voice perfectly flat. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't, Jasper said, the amusement clear in his tone. But hypothetically, if you were in possession of a black USB drive containing internal audits from a company I just acquired, I would advise you that possessing stolen corporate data carries a mandatory federal prison sentence. It would be a shame for a girl with your talent to spend the next 5 years in a facility in Bryan, Texas. He knew Arlo had pulled the discrepancy report, not just the beta logs. You bought a whole freight company to cover up Silas's failure, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. He cost them millions. You bailed him out, and then he stole my code to pretend he finally built something that worked. You're covering up his fraud. The line was quiet for a long moment. When Jasper spoke again, the polite warmth was entirely gone. Silas is a fool, Jasper said coldly. I have told him that to his face. He is arrogant. He is impatient. And his handling of this entire situation has been an embarrassment to my name. I fired him this morning. He will never run a company in this state again. I blinked, shocked by the brutal honesty. But he is still a vanguard, Jasper continued. And I do not allow my family to be publicly humiliated by freelancers. I do not allow SEC investigations into my holding companies. I control the narrative, Maya, always. You can't control this, I said, my grip tightening on the phone. I have the drive. I have the proof. You have a stolen piece of plastic that you cannot introduce into a court of law without admitting to a felony. Jasper countered smoothly. You are broke. You are sitting in a dingy repair shop in East Austin using a burner laptop because you can't afford to pay your own server fees. You are out of moves, Maya. I looked up. A dingy repair shop in East Austin. My blood ran cold. I stepped toward the doorway of the back room and looked out into the main shop. Remy was still at the counter, her back to me. Through the front window across the street, parked next to the train tracks, was a black, unmarked SUV with heavily tinted windows. Lock security hadn't lost me at the library. They had simply followed me onto the bus. "What do you want, Jasper?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I want peace," Jasper said, "and I am willing to buy it. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., you will come to the Barton Creek Country Club. Just you. No lawyers. Bring the drive. You will hand it to me, you will sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement regarding Silas and the audit, and you will sign over the patent to Vanguard Holdings. And if I do that, I will instruct Thad to drop the $20 million civil suit," Jasper said. "I will unfreeze your accounts, and I will hand you a cashier's check for $2 million, tax-free. You take the money, you move out of Texas, and you start over. You get a comfortable life. I get my son's mess cleaned up. And if I refuse, then the men sitting across the street will contact the Austin Police Department," Jasper said calmly. "They will provide sworn statements that they witnessed you receiving stolen corporate property from Arlo Farrow. The police will raid that repair shop. Your friend Remy will be arrested as an accessory. You will be indicted, and I will spend the next 5 years making sure you rot in a cell." He took a slow sip of his drink. $2 million, Maya, or federal prison. See you at 2. The line clicked dead. I lowered the phone. The screen went dark. My reflection stared back at me in the black glass, pale and hollow-eyed. Across the street, the unmarked SUV didn't move. The engine idled, a low, steady rumble that vibrated through the cracked pavement. Jasper wasn't going to call the police. That was the bluff. If I was arrested for possessing stolen corporate data, the USB drive would be logged into an evidence locker. The audit report would become part of a criminal discovery file, accessible to public defenders and court clerks. Jasper didn't want the police involved any more than I did. He wanted the ENDA. He wanted control. I looked at the heavy, matte black ThinkPad sitting on the folding table. I looked at the USB drive plugged into its side. Then, I pulled the drive out, slipped it into my pocket, and walked back out to the front counter. Remy was still soldering. She didn't look up as I approached, but she stopped moving the iron. "Remy," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I need your computer. The ThinkPad is yours." "No," I said. "I need one with the internet. Just for 3 minutes. Please." Remy finally looked up. She looked at my face, then glanced past me, through the storefront window, at the black SUV idling near the train tracks. She set the soldering iron down. She didn't ask questions. She just pushed her rolling stool back and pointed to a sleek silver laptop sitting next to the cash register. "Guest account is unlocked," she said. "Make it quick." I walked around the counter. I plugged the USB drive into Remy's machine. The folder popped up. I didn't look at the raw data logs. I went straight to the bottom of the directory and pulled the PDF of the discrepancy report out onto the desktop. I opened a secure, encrypted email client. 2. Enforcement at SAK.gov CC, Elena.Ross@Ross Litigation. I paused. I needed maximum impact. I needed the people whose money Silas had tried to steal. I opened a new tab, searched the Sequoia Capital directory, and found the public contact emails for the 3 senior partners who had been in the Vanguard boardroom that morning. I added them to the BCC line. Subject: Whistleblower Disclosure Vanguard Holdings / Vanguard Logistics Solutions Material Fraud and Concealed Liabilities. I attached the PDF. I kept the body of the email incredibly brief. To the Securities and Exchange Commission and affected investors, please find attached an internal audit report from Dallas Freight Co. detailing a $4.2 million catastrophic software failure caused by Vanguard Logistics Solutions 8 months ago. This failure was concealed by Jasper Vanguard and Vanguard Holdings via a private buyout. Silas Vanguard subsequently used stolen intellectual property to solicit a $20M Series B funding round this morning to cover these undisclosed liabilities. My attorney, Elena Ross, is copied on this communication and will facilitate any subpoenas for testimony. I stared at the screen. My finger hovered over the trackpad. $2 million. A new life. A comfortable exit. All I had to do was close the laptop, walk out the door, and let Jasper Vanguard win. I could just disappear. But I thought about the 3 years I spent in that basement. I thought about the way Silas looked at me when he told me my work was just a hobby. I thought about Stellan, terrified and running out of a public library. I thought about the way Jasper spoke to me on the phone, as if I were nothing more than a minor accounting error he could erase with a checkbook. I clicked send. The progress bar flashed blue. Message sent. I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my lungs for 3 years. I deleted the file from the desktop. I ejected the USB drive. Done, I said. Remy looked at the screen, then at me. You good? Yeah, I said. I'm really good. I walked out from behind the counter. I pushed open the glass door of the shop. The Texas heat hit me like a physical wall, but I didn't stop. I walked straight across the asphalt, right toward the train tracks. The black SUV was sitting in the shade of a billboard. The engine hummed. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. But as I walked up to the passenger side, the window hummed and lowered exactly 2 inches. I saw a pair of sunglasses. A man in a navy blue polo shirt. The same guy from the library. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the black USB drive, and dropped it through the 2-inch crack. It clattered onto the passenger seat. The man didn't move. He just stared at me. Tell Jasper the meeting at Barton Creek tomorrow is canceled, I said, leaning slightly toward the gap in the window. Tell him the drive is his. He can wipe it, burn it, or eat it. It doesn't matter. The audit is sitting in the SEC whistleblower queue, and every partner at Sequoia Capital has a copy. If he calls the police on me, my lawyer will submit the timestamps to a federal judge. I stepped back from the car. Have a nice drive back to the estate, I said. I turned around and walked away. I didn't look back. I just walked down East 6th Street, past the taco trucks and the faded brick murals, pulling my phone out of my pocket. I dialed Elena's number. Maya, where are you? She answered, her voice tight. I'm in East Austin, I said. Check your email. There was a pause, followed by the sound of rapid clicking on a keyboard. A heavy silence stretched over the line. Maya, Elena whispered. Is this real? Is this the audit? It's real. Jasper bought the company to hide it. Silas stole my code to cover it up. Elena let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. It was the first time I had ever heard her genuinely laugh. The SEC is going to freeze every corporate asset Jasper Vanguard has by Friday. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore. This is institutional investor fraud. Thad Trask is going to drop them as clients before dinner to save his own license. What about the $20 million lawsuit against me? Dead on arrival, Elena said fiercely. They have zero leverage. We're going to petition for immediate summary judgment on the patent. And when the dust settles, Maya, you aren't just getting your IP back. You're keeping the entire company. 6 months later, the air conditioning in my new office hummed a steady, quiet tune. It was a corner space on the 4th floor of a building in North Austin. No mahogany tables, no custom suits, just exposed brick, 4 brilliant young engineers, and a server rack humming with the processing power of a fully licensed $12 million AI logistics firm. Silas didn't go to prison, but he might as well have. He took a plea deal with the SEC, agreeing to a lifetime ban from serving as a director or officer of any public or private company. His startup dissolved into bankruptcy. Last I heard, he was living in a condo Jasper owned in Scottsdale, playing golf and trying to convince anyone who would listen that he was just a victim of bad coding. Jasper paid an 8-figure civil penalty to the SEC. He kept his wealth, of course. Men like him rarely lose everything. But he lost his reputation, his board seats, and his untouchable status in the Texas business community. I sat at my desk, looking out the window at the Austin skyline. The patent certificate hung on the wall behind me, framed in simple black wood. It had my name on it. Just my name. My phone buzzed on the desk. An incoming message from Stellan. He was working as a junior developer at a clean energy startup in Denver now. Just pushed the new update. Code is clean. Hope you're doing well. I smiled, typed back a quick reply, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the core routing module, my fingers resting lightly on the keys. I didn't have to hide in a basement anymore. I didn't have to apologize for my brilliance. I just went to work.